Hey guys, what is up? It is Dean here today with Burn 1. Gonna give you guys basically the rundown on Mob Psycho because, like, I know the set came out, what was it, last year, right? It came out 7 months ago. But I have yet to make a video on it, right? I had to play a bunch of different builds, and then the English Shop League really kept me away from it. I ended up moving. Basically been busy with life, right? I think that personally, people have slept on this set. I think this is a very decent set. I put it probably around the same tier as like Bow Furry, like Frozen Bonds type stuff, where it's very functional deck, right? It's not what you'd bring to like win a big tournament, but it is definitely not what people say, right? I've seen that some people that say Mob is basically the same tier as Batman Ninja and Cardcaptor Sakura. And I know those sets are really bad, like, right? Mob actually has a lot going for it, and I want to really talk about that. So, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of go over the, like, some of the cards, like, kind of, like, explain, talk about them in a vacuum, right? And then I've got 3 different builds I want to go over, and just kind of give you guys, like, a jumping point and talk about them, and then, you know, between the two, you'll be able to hopefully, like, adjust the decks according to, like, your meta, and, just do what you need to with it, right? So let's start off. I want to talk about a couple of things that, like, with the double R's, right? This Reagan right here, I know a lot of people think this card is so cool because it's the most flavorful card. It's super hype, right? Like, you get, it's like it's 10 out of 10 flavor. I think Bushi did a great job on this. It's as cool as, like, the Gurren Lagann Sunder and other actual, like, super flavorful cards. Now, the problem is this card sucks. This card, your deck drops like 1 to 2 tiers when you put it in the deck. There's too many moving parts. The card doesn't do enough. You need healers, you need setup, you lose to blinks. And it's just, the payoff for the card is like almost non-existent. So, while it is a fun card, it is a cool card, I think it's at best a locals card. And to me, it doesn't even meet the bar for what I want to bring to a locals. Taruki early play is actually insane. I don't know why this, like the entire set of Mob, I don't know if it's just like people haven't, because it didn't have the Japanese representation, and then like mixed with the no English tournaments, I think a lot of people just sleep on the set. The Taruki early play, it comes out as long as you have 4 other on-trait characters. It top checks X, so it's a top check 5. And it sits at 10-5 cross turn because as long as you have experience 4, so basically free, always 10-5, unlike Jake the Dog, which is another insane card, the similar early play requirement. The difference is Jake is 500 for every other, so sometimes you'll lose a lane and the Jake will get smaller. Taruki does not have that problem. The Taruki level 1 is also a really good combo. It's just on attack, discard a card, top check 3, grab a card. People say that because the bounce back is tied to the ditch, that it's not very good. I think that's definitely the wrong way to look at it. If you've actually played this and you play the set, I think you'll see that you don't really need a whole lot of cards in hand when you actually end up playing this card. Like, there's not like, you're not looking for like multiple cards in hand. You usually are only looking to have a hand with like 1 to 2 specific cards, and everything else is usually just filler that you're fine discarding. So I don't actually see the problem with this. And the power threshold is it's a 3-5. It gets experience 2, 2k power. So it sits at 5-5, 6-5 with the climax. We can go over the power thresholds later when I'm doing the deck profile, but I think this card's fine. Dimple Coin Flip, despite being off trait, is actually a very respectable card, given the fact that it is 3k power cross turn, like, and if it whiffs the coin flip. And then if you hit the coin flip, it's just a free card. It doesn't matter if that's off trait. You can afford to put a couple of those in your deck without hurting consistency. Show Early Play Heal is an amazing card as long as you're not playing the Mob top end. That's pretty much all I wanted to say about it. I just think you can't put this plus the Restander in the same deck. Once again, the Restander is super efficient. I just want to say that it's a 3-1 basically, because it's draw 2, ditch 2, blind stock 1 on play. It means that in order to triple restand, you only need 4 stock, which means that you can use your stock in the mid game and the early game pretty aggressively to find resources, to heal, to pretty much do whatever, as long as the resources you're using aren't hand. Like, right, you can use your stock more liberally and still have a decent top end. Because triple restand, by the way, is actually a decent top end. I did want to say that. Because most people, they don't like triple restand, or they don't like restanders, right? I noticed that's like a stigma with like the community. I think restand is actually good. The problem is that like what deck has a restander that it can like actually easily triple the restander, right? Usually restanders have like a heavy cost, and so you're either making sacrifices in the like the mid game to build the resources for the restander, in which case it's like your deck is actually just worse because your payoff is not as good. While with mob, you can use your resources in like an aggressive manner, and then still have the restand at the end because the stock threshold is so low. The Ricky is important to talk about as well. It's basically the Kaguya Ricky. It's just like search level 1 or lower, and then power pump something 2k. But this one's experience 2 power pump 2k, which means it doesn't really work like the like the Kaguya Ricky, right? If you have a clean cut on the board, you can power pump it. They're effectively the same, like the later the game goes on. But like in the early game, since this can't give power, sometimes your clean cut plays are a little wonkier. While with Kaguya, you'd be able to pump. But the difference is like in the mid game, right? Like as the game goes on, the Kaguya Ricky is less likely to be able to pump power because you're like more compressed, right? You're more likely to climax. While this will always pump power because it's tied to an experience condition. The Ritsu is bad. You don't need to talk about that. Book Trigger is bad. Let's look at over here. Is there too much to talk about here? What we have in the rare slot, we have an Adachi that's kind of important to talk about. It's a 1/1 bottom deck bomb for early plays. And then the cool thing about this is you can actually shove multiples of this in a deck without it feeling bad because it refunds the stock as long as you top check a level 1 or lower. It hits on events, it hits on climaxes, so basically 2/3 of your deck will be will refund the stock that it takes to play this card. What's unique about that is it means that if you are in like a standby heavy meta, which mob generally doesn't do well with at level 1, you could just choose to play like 3 to 4 of this thing if you were really upset at like that meta, and use that to dismantle the 2/2s they put in the front row. It's not the best, but it is something to talk about because this is a really good early play bomb. The explosion counter, of course, is the top check 4 event. You send it to memory. This card is like basically your main form of mill. I think it's really good because it cleans your stock that you don't really need a ton of, while also providing first deck mill and removing cards from the zones where like they're susceptible, right? Because usually if you sit on a lot of stock, you're susceptible to stock swap. Putting cards in memory is always good, and then like the couple cards key off of it. Speaking of cards that key off of it, this Mob Puppy Love says it's a 5/5. I forget what the condition is. It's a 5/5, and it gets on reverse blind stock as long as you have the explosion counter in memory. I think this card is actually not good in a lot of the mob decks, at least if you're playing the restander. The reason is with the restander decks, you'll see when I'm going over them, you don't need a ton of stock, right? Like the stock is the least of your issues. And so this card that does next to nothing and sits at a relatively low power threshold is not worth putting in a deck that your goal is to be conserving hand because you don't need the stock, right? You'd rather play cards that are a little more impactful than this. The 2/1 support is probably one of the strongest cards I've I don't know. It's one of the strongest back row cards I think I've ever seen. It says as long as it has 3 or less markers under it, every time like a blue Esper or I think it's like a blue or Esper character gets reversed, it like goes under this thing as a marker. So basically, you just slap this thing down in the back row, and if you're in like a turn before like your restand turn, right, and you need to crash, or you just need to sandbag or something, and you're just at like level 2, you slap this thing down, it eats your entire board, you don't get decompressed, you just get free compression, right? It's like you pay 1 stock, and then you get like 2 compression off of it, because you paid the 1 out of the stock, right? So the first one's not free, and then the next turn you could even eat another card, and then have 4 markers under this thing. And then it's got a climax combo with the Reagan, it gives hexproof to the Reagan, but like I said, the Reagan's pretty bad. And then the most important thing about this is also 2k to level 3s. So you can play this for the wall game, you can play this for the sandbag game, all around good card. I generally try to put 2 of it in almost every mob list just because of how good it is in almost every scenario. In the uncommons, I think it's kind of important to mention this mob does have a free fresh event. I do think it's unfortunate in yellow because yellow already has the most mill, like with the most utility to mill of like all of the colors. And generally, like, you don't want to play yellow in the decks that don't have access to mill as much. So sadly, I wish this was a red event, but it does have a free fresh event if you do want to tech that in. They have a climax swapper as well, but I shy away from it if I play pants, because I feel like with pants you can get the cards you need when you need them. Like you're never really looking for a climax when you play pants, right? So I didn't really want to put the climax swap in, but the climax swap is definitely a good inclusion if you want to play like choice gate or something along that lines where you don't actually have access to the climax you want at all times because you don't like get the pants trigger helping you find that. And let's see what else is there. Also at uncommon we have this thing, these two. So remember, a lot of cards key off the explosion counter. It is your main form of mill in the actual set. It's not costless, but it is what it is. The mob part-time job and the Ritsu childhood memories. I have no idea why anyone would put the mob part-time job in. Like, it's come and play clock bond to the mask. Like, you clock a card from your hand to search the mask from deck, or not the mask. Wow, slime. Wow, to search the explosion counter. So I don't know why you would play that, because the Ritsu childhood memories is ditch bond to the event engrave and clock bond to the mob, but like it's top of deck to clock, right? Well, so mob part-time job is you take a card from your hand, you take a damage, and you search. You don't go plus, you just like search a card from your deck. The Ritsu childhood memories is if you clock, you're not taking a card out of your hand, and you actually get an extra hand, right? So he's basically a 0 commitment card onto the board, which is why I think that like the Ritsu childhood memories is so much better, because it does have the option to do that as well, while also being a discard outlet to grab the event. Because like usually, like if you have a climax in hand, right, you usually don't feel good clocking it like a level 1, because sometimes you're trying to refresh at 1/6, and if you play this mob part-time job and you have to clock a climax to get it out of your hand to grab the event, it's like suddenly you're in a bad spot, while the Ritsu would get that climax out of your hand to grab the event. They also have the pants support from Sal. I think it's okay. I think I'll go over why. Like, I think the board setups are a little bit weird with it. Anything else worth talking about? I think the promos, there's 2 of them worth talking about, and then we'll get into the decks. The Petite Reagan, early plays if you're 2 or less in 2 or less climaxes. It heals a specific named trait. It's like Master or Esper to bottom of deck. And then it has like the pay 1 encore if everything's dead or reversed. It's an okay card. I feel like it's not that great, but because it's a box topper, it has a pretty hefty price. The other box topper that I think is far better, and I think actually gives you more utility, is the Petite Mob. Petite Mob's out here. He gives 1500 to middle cross turn. He helps with a lot of the thresholds for power, that because a lot of mob stuff at level 1 is very reliant on your opponent's board either being smaller than it. Well, pretty much everything is reliant upon your opponent's board being smaller than it. Whether it be on reverse or on attack and then gain bounce back, right? Like, both of those care about actually winning the lane. It helps you do that. And then also has, if your opponent has 1 or less characters in the front row, you can bottom deck. So basically, if they only have 1 card in the front row, right, you can bottom deck a cost 0. So if there's like a lot of like scenarios where that can come up. Like, let's say you wall out 2 lanes and they win the last one, you can bottom deck in the mid game. They go first and they open with like Kaguya. They have their runner clean cut card. You can bottom deck it. They have a chaser on the board. You can bottom deck it. 4/5 loner, bottom deck it, right? All around, just super good utility. But now let's kind of get into the list, right? Because I know that's what people are kind of here for, right? So 3 sample lists for you guys today. First one is my own list, the mob it's a choice pants. I think this is the best list into a more aggressive meta. or just like a blind meta. I think this list is just like pretty all around solid. So first we got the 1 of Stock Swap, the 4 of Dimple, the coin flip, the 3 of Brainstorm, 4 Ricky, 2 of the Ritsu Bonder, 2 Petite Mobs, 2 Clean Cuts, 4 Tarukis at level 1, 2 of the Tsuchinokos at level 1, and 4 of the Explosion Counters, 1 Memory Shoot Counter, 2 of the Assist, 2 of the Early Play Top Check X, 2 Wig, which gives 2k power, and Cancel Burn and Hexproof to 2 lanes, 4 of the Restander, and 3 of the Petite Reagan, and of course a 4-4 split on the climaxes. So let's kind of go over this like level by level, right? So at level 0, the important thing is you got these Dimple coin flips, which will preserve hand, while like if they fail to like come back, they will hopefully preserve board. Into hopefully on the second turn, you're able to follow up with one of the Ritsu Rickies to be able to search like a Petite Mob maybe if like they've left you like only 1 lane to, or like maybe you grab the Clean Cut, or maybe you just grab the Taruki to set up your hand. You know, just generally and trying to get more value out of the Dimple again, hopefully. If you open the Petite Mob going second, then like your Dimple in the middle, like after dealing with their card, can be 4-5, so even if you whiff the coin flip, you probably have a chance to coin flip again. This 4-5 is a huge body to deal with, especially at level 0. And then when we transition into level 1, we get the 6-5 on attack bounce backs, right? So now this is what I hear a lot of people complain about, is that the 6-5, right? It's like the power is so low that a lot of decks are just able to answer it. But this is why we include things like the Petite Mob and the Ritsus, right? And so let's say you get hit to level 1, and you have like single Taruki in hand, and you have, or you have like double Taruki in hand and like a Ritsu, right? Or you have Taruki, Ritsu, Petite Mob, any like combination of the two, right? Or maybe you'd like Rickied on the second turn to grab the Petite Mob to attack with like Ritsu plus Dimple. Dimple came back, Ritsu died. You have another Ritsu in hand. Some scenario like that where you can get 2 Ritsus or 2 Tarukis and a Ritsu on board in the same turn, right? And somehow have Petite Mob. If you can do that, middle lane, because Taruki is 5-5 base, he'll get 1500 extra, so he'll go to 8k. So he'll go to 7k, sorry. 7k base, 8k after the climax, right? If you have the Brainstorm, which you probably will, because it's a 3-up, right? He can go to 8-5 in the middle lane. And then the other one is 5-5 base, and Taruki gives 2k power on play, so you get to give him 7-5 base, 8-5 after the climax. You have 8-5 in 2 lanes. Or you could have 8k in the middle, 9k on the side. And then, like, yeah, you'll lose the 1 lane, but the Tarukis are really the most important thing, right? Because then it's like you resolve double combo, and you get to win the lane, you get to hand fix, you get to mill. And usually, what's cool about the Taruki is because it's like repeatable, right? It's not mill 3 when you end up winning the lane with it. It's mill 6, right? So that's like a 12 card mill for free with like double hand fix and 2 extra cards to hand, right? So, and like 8-5 is a very respectable power level. 9k is even more so. 8k in the middle is a little bit less respectable, but like at 8-5, once again, I think you're kind of in that range. Even 8k, 9k though, like, will force counters out of 2 lanes from a standby deck, so you're even able to like pressure like 1/1s and like the standby matchups. And usually the standby decks don't have a lot of hand fixing at the beginning, or I mean they do, but they usually like run like only like 1 to 2 1k counters, and they might not have the time like in the early game to be able to sculpt for it, so you can hopefully like answer at least 1 lane, maybe 2. Then level 2 is you're kind of just trying, your goal is to keep playing down Tarukis, or maybe you play down the Taruki Top Check X to help preserve hand. That's why this card is so important, is the fact that it preserves hand, because you want to go into level 3 with a 7 card hand, clock draw to 9 cards in hand. Triple Mob takes a 10 card hand, so you only need to find 1 extra card off of Brainstorm or triggers. So if you, in your 5 attacks, if you can hit a single Panther choice, you instantly have enough hand for Triple Mob. If you are, if you like Brainstorm first, right, and you can hit 2 on a Brainstorm, you can instantly play Wig as well pretty safely. Or if you even hit 1, you can like gamble on hitting a trigger in the top 5, right? And then you have 3 lanes of restand and 2 instances of cancel burn, and 2 of the lanes are like hexproof, right? So very respectable board. Really only loses to memory shoot counters, which not a ton of decks are playing, and Konosuba with its the event, the foreclosure, right? So as long as like, you're not running into those, I feel like you're in a pretty good spot as far as like getting off the triple restand. And the other thing about restanders is that when it comes to like numbers, right? 3-3-3 is a lot of damage. 3-4-4-3, like right, like fluctuating between 3s and 4s is also a ton of damage in 6 instances, right? Like your opponent, I don't understand like where like the idea is that like restanders are so bad because of like the damage, right? Like I feel the numbers are really good, and then it gets better depending on how your opponent's board is set up, right? Like yeah, if your opponent has nothing on board, but this deck is so good at losing board, right? Like you got like 500 power cards, you got coin flips, you got bounce backs, you have like 1,000 power like shitters to throw into the front row. This 2-1 that like you can have your entire board disappear after crashing, so like you can crash like efficiently without decompressing yourself. Like you have options, right? You have options to set up it so that way they always have a board for this. And then when it's attacking, if they have like level 1s on the board, or they have like a level 0, like if they have level 0, right, you can just side twice and like start off there, and then that way you can deny them counter. Possibly 2 lanes are hexproof, so you can't deal with like anti-damage counters, you can't deal with tap counters, don't get touched by Negsoul. You're pretty much like free from a lot of the garbage that would like normally counter you. And like we even have like I took the blink out, never mind. There's like a reg in the blink stuff, so if you're like afraid of like Negsouls, like things like Rider Anti-Front, you can include that as well. But like right, if they have like level 1s and 2s on the board, you're able to get like side attacks for modular damage. Like let's say you need to stick like 4 damage, you could decide to instead of swing for 3, you could like side attack for 2 and then front for 2, right? Like you have like a lot of options as far as like how your attacks go with this. So all around, I think it's like actually a really good card. It is a little bit more all in than like what a lot of finishers are, like the finishers like heal on play, right? When Mob gets to level 3, it kind of has to go in. But, you know, that's kind of flavor too, right? It's kind of flavor, right? Mob doesn't get angry at the end and then just kind of like sandbag a turn. He kind of got to go all in. But yeah, so this is the choice pants. It's pretty good into, like I said, a more aggressive meta because like you have a lot of closing power. A little bit less good into like heal, stun, like garbage metas like that. But if you are trying to grind, don't worry. There's a mob deck for that. I have this is Gate Pants Mob. This is a more Wally deck. You're trying to win board a lot. And you play, look at this, you play 11 healers. So overall pretty good. We're going to talk about the things that are a little bit different, right? So at level 0, we into like help fix for red, we're playing 4 of the Meraki. What's good about him is he's pay 1, summon a copy of himself, so he fills up an extra spot on your board for 1 stock without taking a damage, right? If your goal is to heal, why would you ever play a Ricky to help keep up hand at any point of the game? And what I like about this is not only that, but like if you're in the like your first turn at like 2 can sometimes be a little bit awkward, right? And stock healers are generally not like I don't like stock healers because you have to commit a hand, right? And it's like hand is a pretty valuable resource for a deck that wants to heal a lot, right? Like if you're wanting to heal a lot and you're over here committing hand every turn, that does add up because like usually if you're healing a lot, you don't want to be clock drawing because clock drawing is like another heal. You have to spend 2 more stock on it. So I feel like these stock healers like slowly whittle away your hand. Even though the show is an insane card, it does like slowly whittle away your hand. But like the first turn, right, you can play down the Meraki and it's like that's a +1 to hand because it summons a card to the board. And then it also will fulfill the early play condition for the show. So you can throw him down, heal, and then like just protect that 1 lane, and then next turn play down another show and kind of go from there, right? And then the early game, of course, free plus. We play only one of the Bonder because we don't play the level 3 mob. We're just playing it to grab one of our explosion counters in the early game. We hit a brainstorm. It helps us like mill a little bit extra if we need to. 3 petite mobs though, because we're going more into the wall strategy at level 1 and at level 2 and 3. It's better to have this 1500 power to middle to, like, you know, kind of contest board. So this deck's definitely a little bit better going second because of that, like, right, than the other deck. Because you're able to open this a little more often and deal with whatever garbage your opponent put on the board turn 1. 2, the clean cut, just because I like to Ricky for the clean cut in a lot of games. Depending on the board setup and like how things are going. Because we are playing a bunch of healers, right? We need a lot of stock at level 2, like 4 stock minimum, probably like 5 to 6 even. We are including a Puppy Love Mob for the extra stock, because it can help us, and also because we got those petite mobs and stuff. Suddenly the this thing is actually sitting at like a respectable power, if we needed to. And then of course 3 of the Ritsu falling from grace. This card is a pretty funny top end, or a really funny combo at level 1 if nobody's ever played it. It's a 4K that gets 1500 power and a level for every marker under it. So it's a 5/5 after a single marker, and of course that keeps scaling. What's funny about it is it's also Shimakaze, so it's on pants, and it means on the first turn, if you don't have like anything else out, this is a 5K Shimakaze, truly the most suffering of cards. But with the petite mobs, suddenly it can get pretty big, right? Like if you get like double petite mob out, like you open a petite mob and then you Ricky for another one, and then you just slap 2 of those down in the back row, your opponent hasn't left you reverse, boom, you slap this thing down. It's a 7K like body. And like you're possibly threatening a backup, it's pretty big. It's pretty big. And then if it gets a single reverse, it goes to 8/5, and then they can like start moving around without the petite mobs and like kind of retain that power and like that threat on the board. And if like your opponent can't answer it, it can sometimes just snowball out of control. Very fun card to play. Not the best. It's like actually just like it's really. It's better than Taruki when you don't have the climax, right? Because Taruki's really bad when you don't have the climax. But like with the climax, it's like an okay card, while Taruki's like a really good card. And then like this thing also is just really funny when your opponent's just letting it do whatever. Better against bad opponents. So now we're going to level 2, and we notice here there's only 2 brainstorm, because at level 2, this is actually the brainstorm you're probably going to want on the board. It's the Mukai, sorry. It gives 1000 power to cards in front, so it helps into our wall strategy, and then it's a tap 2 salvage brainstorm. You still probably only brainstorm once a turn. What's important is that like it helps both of your back row slots commit to the wall game, and like your middle lane can continue to like be even bigger, right? Like if you have like this in this lane and then like this in the other lane, and then you have like a showdown, like these shows can be like 13k in the middle before backups, so that's like pretty huge. And then like you can just like kind of farm resources off of the show and just continuously wall up. Even the Ritsu early play, which is normally not that big, when you start giving it like 3000 extra power, 2000 extra power, it's suddenly a very respectable early play that can sometimes be hard to deal with. And then the combo at level 3 is on a gate. Mostly play it because it heals and because it's on a gate. The trigger is more important than almost anything in this deck, because it gives you like the selectivity, gives you the hand for like everything else, and helps give like the backups in the like all stages of the game. Climax combo is just like on climax placement, shuffle 2 back in to your opponent's deck, and then gain on reverse, gain 2k power and on reverse top deck. So if this thing can find a reverse while you're... If you can find a reverse while you're walling up, like, right? Like if they like answer like a lane and then give you a reverse with this thing, you should be able to, get like a little bit extra reach by putting the card on top of their deck, and then like making your next swing for like 1 less, right? So, I mean, it's like, it's not the best card, but it is like okay. But yeah, that's this list. This is like definitely probably better into something like Dao. Like I'm not going to say this is good against Dao. I'm saying this is like better than this into Dao, right? Because like this because they play 4 Shidos, they blink the Tarukis, you suddenly are struggling a lot. You might have to put a Taruki in the back row. Even then, like, how does Taruki even survive on attack against Dao, right? Because their cards are huge. Well, this one, you actually put up a respectable level of, like, offense at level 2 in order to, like, properly deal with the Dao player. And then you also can threaten Memory Shoot counter, which you might want to bump this up to a 2 of, just to be able to threaten the Dao player even more in the mid-game, because it's like if they attack into a show, or they attack into, like, your cards, right? Because their cards aren't that big on offense, and then you can, like, threaten this counter. Suddenly, it's like they could just lose a lane that they kind of weren't planning on losing, so that can be pretty big. But yeah, so like those are the 2 decks I bring to a tournament. And so now let's get into the last deck, which is kind of like more of a funny one. This is like, wow, I just want to get like a whole bunch of markers under, and I want to play the Restander, and you're just basically playing Protect the Castle with the Ritsu level 1, because we already went over like how that thing can quickly get out of control with the petite mobs. We just went a little more in on it, right? So for our Brainstorm, instead of playing the Salvage Brainstorm that gives you actual good cards in your hand, we're playing the Top Check 3 Brainstorm, because when we play a Climax, a blue Climax specifically, you can give a card 1500 extra power, which is good because it means that this card is suddenly able to hit like more respectable power levels with like less cards on the board. Pants Assist, so that if you trigger the Pants trigger, right, you're able to discard a card to get rid of the Climax that's clogging your hand, to grab like a more impactful character card. This card is, I think it's okay, but I think the board setups get weird because you always don't have a Brainstorm, right? And then to help hold board, you probably either want the Petite Mob or this. And then it's like, where does this go into the equation, right? Like if you're trying to wall up with this thing, like why, like you probably want this thing on the board, and then it's like, where does this go? Like they're kind of like in conflict with each other. I guess if you're in a spot that you don't need this, which is pretty common, you can put this down. Maybe you like wait till second deck to play this and just hope you don't trigger on first deck. It's all over the place with this. Because we're back on the level 3 mob, right? And we play the explosion counters as well. Back up to 2 count on this. This Ritsu, Dinner Time, we haven't talked about it. It's just on play, top check 2, rearrange. And then on attack, you can mill top. If you mill a level 0, the level 0 gets put under your back row. So it's basically like a free plus at level 0, while also in the mid game, I love top check 2. It gives you so much information on how you want to play out your turn. Because like, you know, you only attack 3 times in a turn, right? And so seeing 2/3 of your attacks can like decide like how you want to play out the rest of the turn, right? So just generally good card as far as like information that it gives you as a player. We also play this Ritsu together with Mob. It's a pay 1, you shove it under a Ritsu, and then you top check 4 for either a Student Council, which is every Ritsu except for this one, or a Spoons, which is a counter that we're going to go over shortly. We have enough hits in it. That's kind of why we're playing some of like these like janky cards like this 4 of Heals, this thing. It's also part of the reason we're playing this Brainstorm is to help give more traits for that, to like not whiff. But this is just basically a pay 1, give your card 1500 power for the rest of the game, which, like I said, can help at level 1, getting the first reverse, and then can just like also wall people out, while it also provides dex speed, which is pretty important as well. Explosion counter, which once again, of course, provides dex speed. You can clean out a Climax on the last attack with it. We know about the Ritsu. This is just a bottom deck bomb. On play, look at top 2 of opponent's deck, put them back in same order. Gives you a little bit of information, not really relevant information, but a little bit of information. Bottom deck bombs can sometimes be really annoying depending on what your opponent is like playing, right? If they're playing standby, then it's bad for you, but if they're not, sometimes it can cause a little bit of like annoying pressure. And let's talk about the Spoon counter, right? Because the other deck didn't play this because you had better cards in the other deck. You had like a 2k counter, and you were kind of like playing for actual board, so you wanted to be able to grab cards off a gate. This is an event. It says if you have like a Ritsu, you can play it. If not, you can't. You just rest a Ritsu or an Esper, and then you shove a marker under either the 1/0 or 2/1 that we don't play. This card's really funny because the Ritsu, right, like this thing, it's a 1500 power counter for this, but it also gives a card free Encore. But it's even better than that. It's better than Encore because it shuts off Fever. It shuts off like the Fever effects. It shuts off like the Toka at level 1 and Dao that like people don't actually play. Like the I think that's her name. The top check 5, right? As long as there's like nothing in her lane, like the pseudo Fevers, it shuts those off. And it also is a 1500 power counter. So if they kill your, like let's say the power from the 1/0 is not enough, right? And they kill your Ritsu first, you could just tap it and shove a marker under it. Which is like a free hand encore, right? So it's like a hand encore event. But it gets even more insane if they're only able to like match, or like they're like only 1000 power over or less of the Ritsu. And they run into something else first, because players in this game, you know, generally sometimes you attack in the wrong order. Some players just don't think about attack order, so sometimes not even a misplay on like their part, like right. Like let's say they kill this petite Ritsu, they kill like pretty much anything, right? You can play down the spoon, tap the card they killed, giving it Encore. So right, you saved a card, so that's 1 extra plus, and then you shove a marker on the Ritsu, get a marker. Because you end up killing their card, so you've actually held 2 spots on your board. And Ritsu got 2 extra markers, so that's 2 extra cards out of your deck. Now, on the following turn, right, because whatever you rested is probably something they killed, you can now, what you can do is like move the Ritsu over to the lane where the thing is that you died, and then you can use that card that they killed in like as a chump attacker in an open lane. So this is like really good at conserving hands, just randomly. Just a super solid card all around. It has anti-synergy with this, but it's overall I think it's like pretty fun. And it is like actually it's kind of like a newbie destroyer, right? Like if you're against like players who are kind of like new to the game, or that like haven't experienced this card is like actually like a blowout card. It's pretty funny. Yeah, this list though like kind of struggles with ditch outs. It's more of a fun like locals thing that you could play as long as your local isn't infested with Dao. I think you could have a fun time with this, or like any like blink heavy format. I don't know like what other decks shove as many blinks into their deck though as Dao. Bowfurry probably. Yeah, Bowfurry is probably pretty rough when they have that like Amagi out. It's like just tap, blink a card on your opponent's board. This deck would kind of cry. But yeah, that's it. There's my 3 mob list. I kind of went over some of the cards for you guys, so like you can like maybe like change these lists. I don't think any of them are like perfect, right? This list is definitely a lot like vetted a lot more. I don't think there's like a whole lot that I would change here, other than like there's actually like not much I would change here. The heal one is definitely got some room. You could like change like how many memory shoot counters. You can like swap around the level 3 ratios, maybe play 3 Ishiguro, 4 Ritsu, and like focus more on the level 2 game. You could definitely up the count of this, do all kinds of things, like right, you can just kind of play around with the ratios a little bit. In general though, like this one's definitely a super rough draft, right? That's why we named it rough draft. I plan on making an Adventure Time deck profile, like doing something similar with Adventure Time, I think, going forward, because that's the next set that I feel like gets a little bit not enough credit for like as good as it is. And I'll probably be laying that out next week. So until then, this is Dean signing out.